Shalom, shalom, saints. This is Pastor John Tatum, and you're listening to KYCN Radio.
Put his hand in the neck of his enemy.
The Kingdom of Israel Community Network.
Put his hand in the neck of his enemy.
Subscribe and click on the bell icon today and receive weekly updates of news and events, and all new apostolic and prophetic revelation from Shaleakh Yashah ben Yeshua. To access this epistle in written form, click on the link in the description box below, or visit www.tcvi.org/resources. Outcasts of Yisrael, the chosen reformers of YAH. Shaleakh Yashah Ariel ben Yahushua, servant and royal emissary, for the House of Dawid. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak, and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not delay. Habakkuk 2, verse 3. As children of YAH, we've all come to cherish the scriptural accounts of the remarkable lives, circumstances, and events of the ancient Hebrew Yisraelites. Throughout the generations, divine lessons in living have been learned through every story, every struggle, every victory, every defeat, every bondage, and every deliverance. Beyond the doctrine and instruction of the Torah, these examples shine as guiding lights, and serve as irreplaceable sources of inspiration for us all. In my judgment, of the many lessons to be drawn from these accounts, by far, the most overlooked and misunderstood, are YAH's methods of deliverance and reform. That is to say, the divine strategies and techniques utilized, to bring freedom and progressive change to the Commonwealth. Brethren, to say our collective lack of knowledge in this area is critical, would be a vast understatement. The truth is, most of us know who to fight, and what to fight with, but not how to fight, to successfully marshal the armies of Israel to victory. When all is said and done, we as the faithful Hebrew remnant must finally master, not only the spiritual weaponry of Yahuwah, but the strategies, tactics, and logistics of spiritual warfare, under the divine principles of kingdom governance. For as long as we continue to fight the good fight, apart from YAH's divine strategies, our zeal, and our weaponry, will simply be in vain. Hear, O Yisrael, the hour has come for the introduction of our marching orders, from the high command of our eternal high priest. And the overall strategy of Yahuwah for spiritual reform, is based upon what we refer to, as the principle of the outcast. This basic truth is present and in full effect, with every season of deliverance and reform, in the sojourning of the children of Israel. From the call of Abram, to Yosef, to the exodus from Egypt, to the kingship of David, to the return from Babylon under Zerubbabel, to the advent of HaMashiach, yea, and even unto this final season of our affliction. Throughout the generations of Israel, the reformers of YAH, who emerge at the hour of distress, to deliver his people from sin and oppression, are without exception, chosen from among the outcasts. Simply put, how else can a man deliver a people from bondage, unless he himself is free? Or how can a man serve as a true reformer, while he himself has been shaped by the very system in need of reform? The historic reformers of YAH are of necessity, and without exception, chosen vessels, trained and taught by Elohim in the wilderness, or as it were, away from the camp of the Israelites. Selah. Abraham. In the book of Bereshit Genesis, it is written that the sojourning of our fathers began with Abram the Hebrew, who dwelt eastward in the land of the Chaldeans. YAH called him out from his country and kindred, to embark upon a great journey, one that would eventually culminate with the deliverance of the Israelites in HaMashiach, to permanently possess the promised land. At the time of Abram's sojourn, Egypt was far and away the most advanced civilization in the world. And despite periodic descents into heresy, Egypt was from her very beginning, a YAH-seeking, monotheistic people. Acts 7:22. And unlike her contemporary Babylon, she is destined for a role of glory and honor, in the everlasting kingdom. Yeshayahu Isaiah 19:19-25. This greatly overlooked truth can be further demonstrated, in many ways. For example, the nation of Egypt had no part, in the prophet Daniel's interpretation of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. The image the Babylonian king saw, was interpreted by Daniel as representing all the empires which, like King Shaul Saul, would heed the spirit of Jezebel, until the everlasting kingdom is established. According to Daniel's interpretation, history shows that the image represented Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Again, notice that Egypt is not included. As a matter of truth, apart from the sons of Shem, the two major warring religious ideologies of the time, were the Babylonian doctrine of the Cushites, the hometown idolatry from which Yahuwah separated Abram, and the monotheistic doctrine of the Egyptians. After all, it was the Egyptians who rejected Abram on a pseudo-moral basis, concerning his half-sister and wife Sarai. So we see that at the very outset, in the sojourning of our ancient fathers, Abram himself was an outcast, rejected by the preeminent religious order of his day. Selah. And of course, he eventually became Abraham, the father not only of many nations, the commonwealth of Israel in HaMashiach, but especially of the coming outcasts of Yisrael. Joseph. The next major milestone in the sojourning of Yisrael, was the 70 descendants of Abraham who entered Egypt, and the emergence of Joseph, the son of the birthright. As we all know, Joseph's authority in Egypt became second only to that of Pharaoh himself. And yet we see in this YAH-inspired reformer's life, the same pattern of rejection and isolation from his brethren, witnessed in the life of Abraham. And in suffering rejection by his older brothers, Joseph closely typifies, the ultimate outcast of Yisrael, HaMashiach himself. Like Yahushua, Joseph was despised and rejected for being his father's favorite son. And as an outcast living apart from his brethren, and among the Egyptians, he actually became unrecognizable to the very men, whose lives he would eventually save and transform. Again, it's an outcast of Yisrael whom Yahuwah ordains to deliver and reform. It's also needful to point out, that Joseph delivering his brethren from starvation would not have been possible, without his connection to an insider, his younger brother Benjamin, to whom he gave a double portion. Moshe. It's no accident that the next major reformer of Yahuwah, the great lawgiver, Moses, was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, and raised in Pharaoh's palace. Moses was of necessity, shaped in a different environment than his enslaved kinsmen. He was raised without the stunted and dependent slave mentality of his countrymen. He was also instructed in all the wisdom of Egypt, much of which was clearly the gift of Yahuwah, 1 Kings 4:30, and Acts 7:22. Like the great prophets that went before him, Moses too, was rejected by his brothers, for murdering an Egyptian taskmaster in an impulsive attempt to fulfill his destiny. He was then prepared in the wilderness, away from the congregation of Yisrael, for 40 years, being schooled at first by Yithro, a priest from another branch of the family of Abraham. And of course, he was later instructed directly by Yahuwah. Abba Yah's deliverance and reform through Moses, was accomplished with the indispensable help of his elder brother Aaron. Again, with the help of an insider. Selah. Aaron being raised among the enslaved Yisraelites, meant that he personally shared their experiences and perspectives. He therefore had a certain rapport and influence among the slaves, who left to their own devices, would understandably look upon Moses with envy and suspicion. Furthermore, Aaron was known to be from the favored tribe of Levi, and no doubt had a reputation as an excellent speaker. To be sure, Aaron's role was absolutely critical to our deliverance. This truth is witnessed by the fact that he and his sons became the fathers of the Levitical order of the priesthood. Nevertheless, deliverance and reform of the children of Israel was led by Moshe, a classic outcast of Yisrael. True to form, YAH's liberation of the enslaved Hebrew Yisraelite nation was guided by the principle of the outcast. David. The fact that King David was a man who endured the outright rejection and wrath of his brothers and his government before ascending to the throne of Israel is common knowledge. What's not so common, however, is a full understanding of why. To begin with, he was despised by his brothers because they were passed over, in the search by Samuel the prophet, for YAH's chosen king. And as we all know, they also hated him for having the courage and faith as their youngest brother, to challenge the universally feared Philistine giant, Goliath. And of course, David's later persecution was led by King Saul, who harbored a demonically inspired envy and hatred for YAH's chosen king. David was hailed by the daughters of Israel more so than King Saul, and was YAH's choice, rather than merely the people's choice. Selah. The king's relentless persecution, including his thwarted attempts at murder, literally drove David into the wilderness, away from his oppressed countrymen. And with good reason. David was Shaul's son-in-law, and thus, an administrator of sorts in the king's court. But the arrogant and vain Shaul was so corrupt, and his rule so oppressive, that its continuing influence would have crippled David's ability to bring deliverance and reform. And sure enough, he found comfort, strength, and direction during the wilderness period of his life, which ultimately saw him through to total victory, not only over Shaul's wrath, but over all the foreign enemies of Israel. Again, the principle of the outcast is seen in full effect, even as the royal house, along with the holy nation itself, was established through an outcast of Yisrael, the great King David. Yahushua. We who are true disciples of HaMashiach, know full well, and deeply cherish, the high water mark of YAH's deliverance and reform, in every aspect. Without question, it is the life and ministry of Yahushua ben Yahuwah, the eternal King and High Priest of our profession, the undisputed champion of the ages, the ultimate deliverer, and reformer, and the ultimate outcast of Yisrael. Selah. From conception to crucifixion, the life of the Messiah was ordered, according to the principle of the outcast. To begin with, he was divinely incarnated. This means he lived his whole life, under the burden of being perceived as a bastard, by much of his countrymen. And of course, the Torah places a stigma upon bastards, relegating them to outcast status among the Israelites, Deuteronomy 23:2. He was born in the land of Judea, and yet was only there for a very brief season. He was raised not among the Jews, but in Samaria, outside the congregation, among the religiously despised and rejected. Surely Yahushua bore the outward indicators of being raised in Galilee, which being translated, means heathen circle. It was said of him, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" And again, "You are a Samaritan, and have a devil." The truth is, Yahushua was despised and rejected for not hailing from the land of Yehuda, and was thus widely perceived as unfamiliar, unfit, and unqualified to be king. Again, the Master, Yahushua HaMashiach, is the ultimate outcast of Yisrael. Like Abraham, he left the house of his father, sojourned in Egypt and Canaan, and was rejected on pseudo-moral grounds. Like Joseph, he was despised and rejected, and eventually, he was unrecognizable by his brethren, his abundant gifts from his father, showing forth that he was the favored son. Like Moses, he was adopted, raised, and prepared for the ministry of deliverance and reform, apart from his brethren. Like David, he was set to be executed by the people's choice for king, quote, "We have no king but Caesar," unquote, and was rejected by his brothers for his courage and faith. It is written, "He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs, and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him smitten, stricken by YAH, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities, the chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes, we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, we have turned everyone to his own way, and YAH has laid upon him the iniquity of us all." Yeshayahu Isaiah 53, 3-6. Note, Yisrael is not a son, sacrificed for himself. Selah. Blessed be the greatest outcast of Yisrael of us all. Even so, Amen. James. In the 1st century, the Church of HaMashiach, like her head, was birthed and ordered, according to the principle of the outcast, with Yahushua's brother Yaakov James, appointed as her leader. The Apostle James didn't believe in his brother during his pre-resurrection ministry, and was obviously outside his inner circle of disciples, John 7, 1-5. And yet he was chosen by HaMashiach, during his 40-day post-resurrection ministry, Acts 1, 1-3, to preside over the mother church at Jerusalem, rather than believers Peter, James and John, Acts 15, 1-32. Why? Beyond the fact that he was next in the line of succession to the throne of David, he was untainted by the fleshly controversies that caused Yahushua's disciples to forsake him in his hour of testing. Once again, YAH chooses a man apart from the congregation, according to the principle of the outcast. The outcasts. Finally, my brethren, one of the miraculous signs that astounded both Jew and Greek, and gave the early church the traction to roll through the most horrendous period of persecution she would ever face, was simply this: many of the chief priests, who were the preeminent religious order of the day, highly educated, and politically powerful, came under the spiritual authority of common and unlearned men. Fishermen over Pharisees. Selah. True to the ancient landmark set by our fathers, the ultimate season of deliverance and reform thus far, was put forth and established, by the very outcasts of Yisrael. Hear, O beloved nation, and hearken, you ends of the earth, Yahuwah will yet choose the outcasts of Yisrael. Despised and rejected men, whom Yisraelites as a whole will not easily recognize. Men very different in both speech and in doctrine. Men drawn out and shaped apart from the congregation, and thereby free of the gross error and excess all generations, even of the faithful remnant, acquire over time. The outcasts of Yisrael, divinely sent by YAH, to miraculously deliver the holy nation from all her spiritual enemies round about, that she may be fully prepared for the coming of the Mighty One, the ultimate outcast of Yisrael, our blessed Master and Redeemer, Yahushua HaMashiach. YAH Khai HalleluYAH. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and bell icon at youtube.com/KYCN Media and receive instant notifications from KYCNRadio.com, your official Yisraelite voice for the gathering of the people. Be sure to tune in every Saturday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time for more groundbreaking revelation from our Rod of Iron program with Shaleakh Yashah on KYCNradio.com. Until next week, Shabbat Shalom and YAH Khai HalleluYAH.
Shalom, shalom, saints. This is Pastor John Tatum, and you're listening to KYCN Radio.